Hello and welcome to Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. Tonight we're going to learn about a particular method of language teaching and learning. We've done two previous shows related to teaching in a more traditional classroom and creating materials for such teaching. And at the end of those shows, I think I did emphasize that it's important to use English as little as possible in any language learning situation and use the language that you're trying to learn as much as possible. And we briefly mentioned that there is this method of learning called Master-Apprentice language learning. Our focus tonight is going to be on that approach. Master-Apprentice language learning is basically an immersion technique. That is, the idea would be, for instance, if you're trying to learn Comanche, your teaching lessons will consist of all Comanche and you won't use English at all. That's what language immersion is. And Master-Apprentice language teaching has grown out of or is modeled on other Master-Apprentice types of approaches, I think, which are used in artistic learning, craft learning, and things like this. It's a method which is designed, especially as in the form that it's going to be presented to tonight, it's designed especially for language communities where the language is very endangered, but it's not yet gone. There are still elders who can speak the language and teach it to younger people. By doing this, you are in effect creating new fluent speakers who then can teach what they learn, and so on, and the language learning chain is reestablished. That's the idea. This method was made famous by Professor Leanne Hinton at UC Berkeley, working along with the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival. In fact, there's a manual that they've put out. I'll just show you, you can see that it exists at least. This is a manual for Master-Apprentice method of language learning and language teaching. Here are some of the key points of the concept. You emphasize communicative and social functions rather than just the idea of learning massive amounts of vocabulary. And you do this because you're learning by doing. The master or teacher and the apprentice or student are spending large amounts of time together simply living their lives, using language in its natural setting. And so it doesn't matter that you don't know a massive amount of vocabulary as much as it matters that you can do functional things. There's a list of things that were put out at the workshop that we're about to see. Communicative and social functions such as identifying or naming things, to affirm or negate, to generalize, to describe, to ask the identity of something. Expression of feelings, fondness, sympathy or pity, dismay or alarm, resignation. You can know lots of vocabulary but not know how to do these language functions. So this approach will focus on these functions. And so while it is immersion, which basically means Cherokee only or whatever the languages you're trying to learn, use that only and don't use English, there's a lot more to it than that. It's a kind of informed, trained approach to language immersion. Both the teacher and the student or apprentice need some training in order to make the most of this situation. It also emphasizes, I think I did, that it emphasizes language in its natural setting. The natural setting of language is life. We use language for functions in our life and to express social and emotional things. We don't just do artificial exercises like happens so much in traditional classrooms. It also emphasizes that language and culture go together so that the master and apprentice are encouraged to do traditional activities while talking about it in their language of heritage. And that way you compare the two kinds of learning and both areas benefit, I think.
2, 1.
Now, how is this actually done? The classic model, as outlined in the manual here, is that you pair one fluent master with one apprentice, who is either a complete beginner or at least is still learning the language. And mainly these two people live their lives together, they do things together, and they do it intensively over large amounts of time, and they don't use any English when they do it. And the idea then is that when the student sees enough of language in context as it's actually used with the meaning apparent, because you're talking about things that are happening around you, they gradually begin to catch on and they become fluent much more quickly than they do in a typical classroom situation. But remember, both the teacher and the student have had some training in how to use this method in order to make the most out of it. The tape that we're about to see will clarify how this works. Taped by Linda Jordan and myself, it shows parts of a workshop presented in Lawton by Master-Apprentice teachers from California this January. On the tape, you'll see Leanne Hinton, who's a professor of linguistics from UC Berkeley, who has helped to popularize and explain and teach this method. And you'll also see Nancy Richardson from California, who's a member of the Karuk tribe. And she's been a language methods teacher for some time, but has recently become an apprentice herself to learn the Karuk language. You'll also see Matt Vera, Agnes Vera, and Jane Slippo, who are all Yolumnis from California. And Matt is an apprentice, and he's been learning from his mother Agnes and also from his aunt Jane. And I think we're going to see Ronald Red Elk, who's president of the Comanche Language and Culture Preservation Committee. Let's take a look.
We're not asking you to exactly behave as usual, but the more you can, as teachers in the home, the more you can just either go around and tell people what they are doing or tell people what to do, the more they're going to learn Comanche. And this is a really good chance to get people to do a lot of stuff for you. You know, like, take me to the store, get the keys, come out to the car, start the car, drive me to the store. You know,
wash my dishes.
Wash my dishes. You can use pictures. That's a good way to be teaching the language. Be looking at, say, a magazine together and talking about what you see. For people that don't know Comanche very well, just saying, here's a man, here's a woman. For people that know Comanche a little bit better, you can get them moving forward by showing them new things, like this woman is wearing a long skirt, or the man and the woman are sitting down together. Right? So there's lots of things that you can tell them from the pictures, and they'll understand what you're saying by seeing the pictures and seeing what you're pointing to. The better it is. So pick up that wood, pick up some more wood, go out and pick up some more wood, go out again and pick up some more wood. Then you've really shown the. But actually, I think, you know, the apprentices that I see here, a lot of you know enough Comanche to be able to talk back a little bit. Like, no! But if you've got a beginning apprentice, for a few weeks, that apprentice is not really going to understand what you're saying except through the actions. But after a while, he'll start understanding the words.
Kohtaloiden. Että tämä kuuna. Tämä töökaa. Tämä töökaa. Ikä kokomi. Mä rohimsi kanikupattoman himaksi. Kumak marani. Ik marani. Ika huuta.
Ik?
Juo. Tää juo. Kohto. Itse. Hukkuun.
Hukkuun? Oo.
Hukkuun.
No,
Papà pitoppa. Tämä on kyllä hyvä viisaus. Papà pitoppa.
Eikä kuna kutta.
Itä vaan. Ise vanakot se. Namokko. Moi kotsi. Me paata makku oppe. Me ku ika vanakot se jaati momma Hanni. Minä mä rekitsi. Mä rekitsi ikä vanhakotsia kotsia muuhun. Me ikä tsaatsuikin. Winu namotsoma jaati moi matsumu. Namotsoma. Me kuinka voi.
Thế mà này kia hình ăn thế mà này kia hình ăn
Ini kuna na namo kotsete namo helmi. Namo kotsete ini kuna na namo kotsete Yes.
You need to hear this word over and over many times. And when you're very first learning, in the very first part of the time that you're learning, you're going to be listening to what the master speaker says, and you're going to be trying to imitate what they're saying, and kind of like mimicking. You know, whenever they say something, you know, you'll want to, mimic it, but you won't be speaking it. So first you'll listen, and then you'll mimic, and you'll go through this time of saying a lot of Indian words, but you're not really speaking, but a lot of Indian words are being said.
So it's sort of a stage where after, as a learner, after you've heard it a while, you might be able to repeat after the master, but you wouldn't be able to just come up with the word yourself. You'd have to hear it first, and then you could repeat it.
Or know the meaning on yourself, but you're repeating things. They call this a formulaic time, and you're basically copying your master. And then you'll do a lot of things, not just on words, but like where are you going and common phrases like that. You'll be copying your master, but you won't be talking on your own. As you become more advanced, as a master, you will find that all of a sudden your new speaker is going to sound to you worse instead of better, okay? What it is, and it's kind of like a crazy period, and you have to have a great amount of tolerance, because when they're mimicking you all the time, they're just mimicking what you're saying. But when they start to think and form their own senses, they're going to sound kind of funny. When to talk, they're going to sound worse than when they're only just mimicking you like parrots. When they mimic you like parrots, that's one form of speaking. But when they start to talk, it's going to sound worse. So keep that in mind so that you know that really they are progressing and really they are getting better. They're beginning to think, but they will sound worse than when they copy you, because they're modeling after you at that time. So that's a big growth area that you have to walk your new speaker through. You have to, if they say something wrong, you walk them through it gently, several times, gently but you have to encourage them to begin to think in Comanche as a real speaker, not as a copycat.
Okay. Now we're going to do objects. This is I'll say it in English here. This is a cup. This is a jacket. Okay, so whatever two objects you pick up, we want the masters to demonstrate it a few times to the learner. This is a cup. This is a jacket. It's a cup. It's a jacket. Cup, jacket. Say it a few times. And that's where you're first introducing the words to the apprentice. And then the second stage, and so the master will say something like, touch the cup. Touch the jacket. And so that's when the apprentice can do that right, he's recognizing the words for cup and jacket, or for whatever two objects you have. And so you would say that a few times. until you know that the apprentice knows those two words well enough that he can touch the right object when you tell him to. At first you may have to show him the right object if he doesn't recognize it, but eventually you shouldn't have to point to the object yourself. He should be able to touch the right object when you tell him. So that's that recognition stage where the apprentice recognizes the word. Now the third stage is where the apprentice can say the word after you say it. And you can have him say it after you, or you can ask him questions, and this is probably a good way to do it. Is this an X or a Y? Is this a cup? Is this a cup or a jacket? And then the answer is, it's a jacket. And so you do that a few times. Pick up the cup. Is this a cup or a jacket? Pick up the jacket. Is this a cup or a jacket? Until the apprentice can say those words correctly. The fourth stage is where the apprentice can actually say the word himself without being prompted. And you can test that by asking him, what is this?
Paisaruk. Payung paisaruk. Karu. Payung sapinich. 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 Payung aquat. Payung paisaruk. Payung sapinich. Aquat, paisaruk, sapinich. Afish. Afish pamu aquat. Afish pamu paisaruk. Afish pamu sapinich. Barbara, afish pamu paisaruk. Afish pamu paisaruk. Buddy, afish pamu aqua. Roy? Mark. Afish pamu sapinich. Tidak apa. Aqua. Tidak apa. Paisaruk. Tidak apa. Sapinich. Ifiki pamu aqua. Ifiki pamu paisaruk. Ifiki pamu sapinich. Mapai pa sapinich pa bari. Mapai. Betty, mapai pa paisaruk pa Barbara. Barbara, mapai pa paisaruk pa Mark. Mark, mapai pa aqua pa Barbara. Payung paisaruk. Payung sapinich. Payung aquat. Payung paisaruk. Payung sapinich. Payung aquat. Khadar. Okay. Payung sapinich. Khadar. Payung aquat.
Got it wrong.
Baisaruk? The next section that we're going to do is called planning your work together. What kind of things do you want to do? And what happens a lot is when the two of you get together, you sit there and you wonder, well, what are we going to do today? And we find that it's easier to, instead of trying to create all these things that you are going to do, but make it fit along with your life. So let's list some of the things that you might do in your daily life. Okay. What kind of things do you do? You eat. So you could eat together. That would be a good one. Eat. Clean house.
Somebody said get up.
You get up in the morning, and you can learn all the little things that go with greeting the day, getting up in the morning. Things that might just be very much command. Okay.
Sewing.
A lot of people like to sew. Sewing is a good one. What was another one that someone said? Singing. You guys like to sing, huh? Some of you? And you can sing in Comanche with each other. That would be real fun. This is traditional things you like to do. Doing Indian language on traditional things is one of the strongest things that you can do to bring Indian language use back into your communities, because when you're doing traditional activities and they're done in Indian, it makes the culture much stronger, and it makes, it's more, I don't know, but it's just a really good, strong thing to do. It's good to be able to talk about your food and talk about other things, but when you talk about traditional things, it's just even a little bit stronger. You get more things in there. Like where we live, we eat a certain kind of food called acorn soup. So gathering acorns is a very important thing to the California culture of many of the tribes there. So gathering our acorn is a traditional thing, and making acorn soup, which takes a lot of work, and we pound it, we gather them, we dry them, and we pound them with the rocks, and we leach them and cook them with hot rocks and all these kind of things. So a lot of these things don't have real translations in English. So when I do these kind of activities with my little nieces and teach them how to make acorn soup, I never teach them those words in English, so they only know how to say a lot of those words only in Karuk. And if you're someone that makes acorn soup and you're at the ceremonies, then you're considered to be, really something there. And so if you're not only an acorn soup maker, but you're an acorn soup maker in Karuk, then you're a double Karuk there.
Ita na bukugwa ma kusumava toit. Matzapuit, ika na bukugwa. Matzapuit, makar. Ika tetsi tema meko maksimi tiva ma Maraika. Imama ma eka which me itse ma tunetsen Anahu matunetsen ini ko pizza mapino tano tunasa manu gitu. situ.
You apprentices should never have to say, what is this in English ever again. You know how to say it in Comanche. So now whenever I come back here, I can always say, Isahin. I shouldn't never have to use an English question for that anymore. And so, and for your apprentices, because you have to claim just as much of the responsibility as your master in learning. Once you learn something in Comanche, you should never ever have to say it in English again. Ever. Yowika?
Wallet,
Wallet. Hauki?
wallet,
Wallet. Hauki?
antiego,
Antieko. Hauki?
wallet,
Wallet.
wallet,
Hauki?
antiego,
Antieko. Hauki?
kulashoy,
Hauki?
sasa, sasa ne?
Sasa.
Sasa,
Hauki?
sasa,
Hauki?
kulashoy,
Hauki?
antiego.
Much of the philosophy and many of the techniques that we've just seen are things that I've always advised. Things like using language immersion, pairing language and culture together in your learning process, pairing the fluent elders with the students, with the younger students. However, it is very striking, because I was in the workshop there, it was very striking to hear Matt Vera say, before I couldn't speak my tribe's language at all, and after some time spent in Master-Apprentice training, now I can speak it. We saw him demonstrate his speaking with his mother. The Comanches do have their own Master-Apprentice program going now. It's got a little bit of a twist to it. That is, they have one fluent master paired with a household of apprentices. It's a multiple apprentice approach, so that a family, for instance, can learn together. I think it's an interesting approach. They've been doing this now for a couple of weeks, and I certainly wish them the best. See you next time on Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene madaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene madaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene madaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene madaone kita.